welcome to new Energy Facts Chats with me, JP Warren, and we are actually recording this in person at the Petroleum Club of Houston with my brother from California. Anytime now, Mike. You want to check?
Mike Umbro. Well, you gotta bring me in here. I don't want to cut you off.
Wait a minute. We're being interrupted. Special announcement. This is also a joint Energy Crüe podcast, which is my other podcast. Just because I think right now, who we have right now, we have Ryan Walker, who just came on the podcast, Energy Crüe podcast, which I thought was an amazing discussion I had with you. And we also have my buddy Mike Umbro from California coming in town to speak at the SPE conference. And you know what? No better way to have some energy conversations. Talk about Energy Facts Chats, where we our goal is to bridge energy expectations with energy realities, and also Energy Crüe. Just a couple cats sitting around talking energy. What any of those things that inspire us. So obviously I want to thank you all for coming, flying in, meeting us in the middle in Houston for this special episode.
It's great to be here.
It's good seeing you. Good seeing you in person.
I know, right?
Yeah, it's not that, you know what, I don't mind doing like Zoom podcasts. You got the audio, you got the video and all that stuff, which is great, but you don't have the interpersonal.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Beats in person.
You gotta have the interpersonal, the banter, you read people and talk to people. So that's what I did. We also have my producer over here.
Go on. Eric Berger's in the room. Okay. One of my partners in our geothermal project in California. A wealth of knowledge, a walking encyclopedia.
And where is he from originally? Oildale, and now he's a resident of Bakersfield, which I love that. So, part of it, this is an Energy Crüe podcast, but I think I'm going to take this down the road of Energy Facts Chats, just because I think, with your background, Ryan, for those that don't know, Ryan is actually lives in DC for the past 20 years.
22, but who's counting?
So bad at math.
Yeah.
In an industry of engineers, I'm bad at math. But yeah, so in DC for 22 years, and kind of, we had an episode with him where he kind of shined some light on what it's like as a energy policy lobbyist in DC. Very fascinating stuff, and it kind of, you never really have the chance to talk to someone who's kind of a lobbyist. You always just hear about it. So to actually, put a face to the profession, face to the name is very awesome, and I appreciate that. And Mike, you're in town talking about some. What are you doing in town?
Solar geothermal. We're talking about moving our energy systems to the next generation. So we are presenting our project at the SPE conference in town, here speaking with you all, hanging out, having dinner tonight at your Crüe event, of course. Sitting here in the Petroleum Club. So that's always fun. Kind of brings me back. I think the first time we met was doing one of your Energy Crüe podcasts.
Really?
In that dining room. Wasn't that the first one?
So.
Yeah,
I think so. Now look at us.
Now look at us. Tag teaming on Energy Facts.
Tag teaming. We got a 3.2 review on Spotify. So if you're out there listening on Spotify and leaving us and we know Bob's not doing that.
No.
Bob's a 5-star. He loves Bob is his neighbor who listens to this.
Oh, okay.
Family. So Bob, you're tuning in.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Yeah.
We hope everything's well. So what's going on right now in the energy space realm right now? In the energy fact chats discussion, what's going on? You guys are having a hurricane currently.
Yeah, a quote unquote hurricane. It was just a lot of rain.
Okay.
Earthquake, right?
Yeah, and an earthquake. Yeah, earthquake in Ojai. It was really just, it would be good weather for you Houstonians. It wasn't that big of a deal at all. But we got here on time, ready for the show. And I have a question. We kind of talked about it a little bit at lunch, but I think, and this is one of my pet sayings or warnings, that the policy is spreading, and the policy in California, I believe, is very much mirrored in DC. So I would love to kind of kick it off with some discussion around what we can share with maybe some listeners here in the Texas area. And maybe speaking of storms, how should people be preparing for the next 5 years in energy in tech? Let's start in Texas specifically.
Well, look, I've been in like DC for 22 years, been in politics for that long, and seeing where things are going now, people need to be prepared, because there is people talk about the energy transition all the time. And I don't see it that way. As I told you guys before, when we were having lunch, I said, look, I see it as the energy expansion,
100%.
there's like Republicans in Congress for a long time have constantly said, we need to have an all of the above approach. And I think that that's just gotten a little bit cliche, even though there's still truth to it. I think that we need to be talking about it in terms of an energy expansion, because we need every form of energy, because global energy demand isn't going down by any means. So I think what people need to, especially in the oil and gas industry, there's a constant attack on the oil and gas industry. But the fact remains is we're never going to be without oil and gas, because we're not, we need the petrochemical industry, we need natural gas, and you can obviously create blue hydrogen out of natural gas. So there's all these different uses, but the oil and gas industry needs to, in oilfield services, and anyone, associated with the oil and gas industry needs to have a voice in the process to make sure that they're not shut out, not scared to engage in the process.
My question is, if I'm sitting there on the sideline and I'm saying, I'm hearing this, you got to be prepared for what's coming down the tunnel. Number one, how do I have a voice? Number one, but number two, how do I prepare for something like this? I mean, what do I have to do? Circle the wagons, start buckling hatches down? Like, how do I prepare for the next 5 years, and how do I get involved?
Well, one is from a very basic level, and I guess as we talked on the Energy Crüe podcast, this is my public service announcement to everyone to get engaged in the process. Vote. Elections have consequences. When the party in power is determining the direction of energy policy in this country, and there is often I think that it's no secret that like there's this political divide between one party and the next, and I think that there needs to be an education process. There needs to be a voter contact process by people educating voters as to what the energy realities of this country and the world are.
Well, what sucks is, and this really does suck, is the fact that, look, there's always going to be, different political parties, different political views. That's what makes everything so spicy. That kind of gives the ingredients of life. Yep. But the fact that energy has taken kind of this camp mentality or this camp mindset, you have to pick one or the other. To me, that is such a regressive mindset, and it's not realistic to think that you have to pick one versus the other when it should be, as we talked about at lunch. And I don't mind rehashing a lot of lunch conversations that we had too. We need it all. Right. And there's a huge component about that's not being communicated to the everyday consumer or to the families out there.
Right. One thing that you mentioned at lunch that really struck me, and we talk about it in California, is how are we allocating our time and our resources for that expansion. And in our case, we're talking about taking what is traditionally thought of as an oil reservoir and making it a geothermal project, and storing energy and adding meaningful, reliable energy to the grid, allocating our time and energy as a small operator for that project of the future that our policies are supposed to be supportive of. And I think that's one thing specific to places like Texas, and you mentioned it, these oil and gas operators are making a lot of money at these prices. And how are they allocating their resources? Are they paying back shareholders, which seems to be what they're doing? Are they buying back stock, which seems to be what they're doing? But are they spending money to educate voters? Are they spending money to get out in front of, or you can't say in front of, to start playing the game that the environmental activists are playing really with policymakers alone? There's really
telling
a
our story. That's really it. It's not playing it is the game and all that stuff. But for me, it's just kind of providing kind of the story, what makes our industry so cool. And again, going back to our industry, like it is such an archaic, dusty image. Right. I mean, you got the uneducated roughneck, and you got the 75-year-old white-haired dude dumping oil, dirty oil behind an orphanage. But in reality, I mean, there's entrepreneurs, there's tech geniuses, there's engineers, there's problem solvers. I mean, we were at lunch, and you were saying, look, I'm never going to retire because I just our industry likes work, and we like solving problems. So again, reintroducing who we are as an industry, I think, is also a pretty important piece to it. But the piece that's not being communicated is that other side, the energy. If let's say this I don't even want to say that word, but let's say we remove all the way from, away from the hydrocarbons and go strictly on this stuff. That doesn't change the fact that my house, to cool it, requires this amount of input.
Right.
This still requires this amount of input, whether I like it or not. The realities.
People are only getting, the information that people are putting out there. So the oil and gas industry, the oil field services, anyone associated with this industry, you can't sit on the sidelines, and there's only so much, and they're doing all they can. The APIs, the AFPMs, those trade associations in DC, they're doing a good job, mounting the loyal opposition, so to speak. But there's only so much they can do. There needs to be other entities outside of direct, it can't be API led. It can't be, Chevron led. It has to be separate. People can help, fund that, but there needs to be a concerted effort, to get people educated about the energy sector.
So where does one start? If I'm in my car listening to this and I hear you say that, I'm like, you know what? I like that, Ryan. That was a good point. Now what?
Now what is there's folks like myself who've lived in Washington for, years and years. And while all of the engineers, they've mastered their craft by being great engineers, drilling great wells. But where we in Washington, we've spent our time learning, as we talked about, the 4 Ps: the people, the process, the politics, and the policy, and how to engage that process, both from a policy perspective, but more importantly, a political perspective. And, folks like myself and my partners at Shoemaker Advisors, we can help those companies engage, either from a lobbying perspective, a public affairs perspective, and so that people can get their message out. Or, when it comes to lobbying, that, like, as we talked about, you can either take an offensive posture or a defensive posture, and just depending upon what the ultimate goal is for the organization.
One thing, and maybe this is a bit of an idea, but I've talked to, through our group, Californians for Energy and Science, and I've talked to our members about how do we reach the community and how do we get engaged, and who spreads that message. We're all trying to work, at least me, I got a full-time job trying to develop a project. And I mentioned to them, retired teachers, they care about their communities they're in, they care about education, but maybe as an industry, one way to broaden that scope is maybe it's, as we say, people in our industry don't like to retire, but maybe it is, we hear about the talent gap, and the big crew change in oil and gas. Maybe it is providing a platform for those executives and those engineers and those people that are leaving the industry. Hey, stay involved, because nobody wants to just retire and sit at home and watch Judge Judy. They're going to want to do something. So, but how do you organize a framework, a structure for people to be involved in that kind of an outcome?
And to your point about, you have a full-time job, all of these, you and others in the industry are all running businesses. Oftentimes, you don't have the internal departments like some of the bigger guys do to have in-house government affairs people or in-house regulatory affairs people. That's where we come in, and we help companies, whether it's one company or a group of 4 companies that want to band together or something like that, so that we can act on their behalf.
And that's the thing. I mean, that's another thing we're talking about too. It's like when it comes to the realities of what the human race needs right now when it comes to energy. However, you're up in DC, you're in California, you are in 2 of the most hot, politically energy focused environments I can imagine right now. Okay. All right. That being said, all of your efforts, Ryan. All right. So it seems like all of your efforts, especially what's going on today and all stuff, you too, Mike, with Californians for Energy and Science, I read this interesting statistic that there was, 5 years ago, about 15,000 permits and
1,500. New wells drilled.
I'm not a reader either.
That's okay. That's okay.
No, I'm joking. My producer, Eric, told me that. But, and then there was how many?
7 this year.
7 this year. So
all based on 2022 filings that were just trickled in to permit a couple of wells.
Okay, so being in the hotbed in DC and being in California, seeing 1,500 to 7. I mean, it's this constant wake up. It's this constant. I want to do something. I want to do something impactful. first off, what's keeping y'all going? But second off, are you seeing kind of the landscape look more optimistic, or is it just kind of a little more pessimistic every single day when it comes down to the energy realities? And that's a good question.
I'm an optimist. I'm different than our producer, Eric. Yeah. I see us having to break through the doldrums of just kind of a ridiculous posture, right? Nothing is not an option. You cannot permit nothing and expect that the industry can improve, whether that's a transition, expansion, whatever you want to call it. You can't do nothing as an agency and expect change. Right? How can you better the environment if you don't permit anything? You really can't. It's not going to happen. I believe that it will still require a crisis of supply or pricing or both.
So you're looking for the energy boomerang to occur.
I think we've thrown that boomerang out.
You heard this?
It's coming back eventually, but it's still far away, right? If that makes sense. We're still, and this is the time, to Ryan's point about getting engaged. And as these conversations are spinning around DC and Sacramento, if it's just a couple of people engaged, we're going to have a much longer fight on our hands. If suddenly we see bigger operators get more engaged and start, showing their voices more, then I think things start to move a little bit. But
I wouldn't even say that falls on the bigger operators. That just kind of falls on.
Well, that's all that's left.
Okay, never mind. So touche.
I mean, that's kind of all that. You've got bigger operators, and then literally companies just kind of folding up. And how do we produce these wells and then plug them? That's the mentality right now. And when I started my career, California was the number 3 producing state in the country. Now we're 8 and falling. So that's where I continue to say, don't think this cannot happen to your state.
And that's what the point I'm trying to make is that, look, you're exactly right. There are factions out there that want to shut down the oil and gas industry completely, 100% full stop. And that's why engaging the political and the legislative and the regulatory process in some way is so important for companies to do, to have a voice in that process, because without it, then you become a victim to what the government just does to you.
Right.
Go in on that a little bit. I want you to kind of peel that back a little bit, because a lot of times, I think, it's 2023 right now. A lot of people believe that, if the government comes out with something, like, obviously it's like, okay, you really can't have a voice to any, opposition towards it or something like that. So you say don't be a victim to that. So, and that's actually kind of engaging with politicians, engaging with your local and national representatives, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, we're Shoemaker Advisors. We're a bipartisan firm, so we'll talk to anybody on either side of the aisle. It's about, look, for us, it's even more so about what the company's goals or the organization's goals are. It's not about red or blue per se. It's about engaging the political process and understanding the politics of it. You're writing comments to notice of proposed rulemakings. You're going and talking with members of Congress and their staff who are the subject matter experts. You're going in and talking with career folks at the Department of Energy or Department of Interior.
Doing what you do, I guess you always have to have some sense of optimism, I guess, to do what
I
you
do. Look, and people, it's not, I don't operate with rose-colored glasses by any sense of the imagination, but what I do believe in is this country. I believe in the Republic. We're the best form of government on the planet. And I think we have a bright future, but it can't always be a zero-sum game. We have, where the District of Columbia is geographically was an effort of compromise between Jefferson and Hamilton. So our country is founded on some level of compromise. You don't have to give up your principles, but you don't have to give up your core beliefs. But Ronald Reagan, I think, is the one that said, "Look, if you're with me, 80% of the time, you're my friend." And you fight for the next 20%. It's not always a an all or nothing game, so to speak.
I think that compromise is a key word. And that, I think, going back to my spirit of optimism, it is compromise in that as a developer or an operator, we can go to policymakers and say, hey, look, these prices at the pump are not sustainable. They're not good for the people of California. They're not good for your constituents, and they will get angry. And I've said this in committees in Sacramento when I've been asked to testify for Shannon Grove's pieces of legislation. I've said to them, look, this is something that's going to fall on your shoulders when people are paying $10 at the pump. Or how can we help you, utility companies, public utility commission? How can we help you bring rates back down? Nobody seems to be talking about bringing rates down. That's a winning bipartisan compromise type of a solution. And then on top of that, as an industry, we all have to be comfortable going into what you perceive as hostile territory. And myself, I was just invited to lecture at a guest lecture at UC Berkeley of all places. And people, when I tell them that, even in Bakersfield, the initial reaction is like, we don't like Berkeley because we hear so much of the movement to shut us down from Berkeley. Well, that's where you have to go to teach the students what the realities are of their future career choices, of their future donations to political groups, of their participation in NGOs.
Yeah.
They need to understand that the energy systems in California are powering the fourth largest economy in the world. And it cannot be done by one single technology. And why can it not be done that way? And you have to explain that to people in a spirit of compromise, of saying, hey, this is an example, going back to our project, it's what I know best. This is an example of compromise. This is an example of a traditional oil operator coming to you with a clean energy project to bring your rates down, to give you reliable energy at night when you don't have it from quote unquote renewable, traditional renewable. So it's those kinds of things that we need to start stepping up and entering these forums that we perceive hate us, but just go. It's not that big of a deal.
I've always heard you make the most amount of change by getting involved. I mean, yes, you can sit on the sidelines, bitch, gripe, and complain about something, but that's really not going to change the course of direction unless you kind of get up and start kind of getting involved in a little bit. And I think first off, I think that's awesome. And it's funny, whenever it's like Denver, or like when I go to these cities, like, why are you going to Denver? They hate the oil and gas. I'm like, that's where we should be staying. Right. When places that are first off, when places get their majority of their taxes from the oil and gas, all that stuff, and it's such an important powerhouse to the people of the state and all that stuff. People knock it, they poo-poo it. They're like, get out of there, get out of there. That's where you should be. I mean, you should be there to educate the community. You should be there to kind of talk to the people that are against you. Sit across the table with someone like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this person isn't that bad of a person. They're trying, we're on the same boat. We want to provide for our families, we want to have some money at the end of the day. So I don't think you need to shy away from these places that are kind of opponents of yours. If anything, it's an opportunity to kind of reach across the table and shake a hand.
Absolutely. 100%.
So,
but we also need to not just talk amongst ourselves in the energy industry and renewables and whatever else. We need to talk to and engage and educate the youth, because they're the ones that are going to be voting, in 6, 8, 10 years time.
Right.
And right now, the energy industry message isn't getting to them.
Not at all.
It's not.
Not at all. And they don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they hear, if they're on TikTok, if they're on whatever platform they're getting their information from, the algorithm is just feeding them what's, firing their brain, it's just feeding you what you want to hear.
I mean,
when you present them with facts and what's different, it really doesn't trigger them. I mean, I've had students that I've presented to at Berkeley in the past they've come up to me after the presentation and said, wow, I really didn't like oil and gas before this, but now I don't know exactly. Things are turning, things are happening that's different. And they like that. They like challenge.
Because at some point, I mean, we can talk amongst ourselves all we want, but at some point, if we don't get our message out to the up and coming generations, we're not going to have any engineers to get it out of the ground. And you know, and as we need to educate the young people, old people, policymakers, because it's also about energy security.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
what do you mean? What do you mean by that? There might be some people out there that have heard energy security, or like it's a topic point. For those that are out there that might not be following you, they're just tuned in because they got, you know, two dudes on there. What is energy security, and why is it so crucial?
Well, I think it's important because, look, I mean, as you look out the windows here and you see the energy capital of the world, it's no secret that not everybody likes America. And, you know, you have a war going on between Ukraine and Russia right now that has energy implications to that. So we need to be able in this country to be secure with our own energy, to produce enough energy is one. But if you don't have, you know, you can produce all the energy you want, you know, pull all the oil and gas out of the ground, produce as much electricity as you can. But if you don't have the refining capacity, the pipeline capacity, the transmission capacity, all that's for naught, because you can pull it all out and create it, but you can't send it anywhere. You can't get it to people.
Right.
And we need to be able not only to produce, you know, the raw material, but able then to process it into, you know, transportation fuels, electricity, whatever form of energy people need, so that we can feel secure in our country, that we're not dependent upon, you know, foreign sources of energy. I hate to sound so political when I say that.
No, but that's what we've been talking about, energy facts chats, because California is the prime example of that NIMBY mentality.
We're an import state. We import 75% of our crude oil. We import, what is it? 30% of our electrons now. We import everything because we're pushing it all out. And what that creates is a dynamic where you're vulnerable to supply and price shocks.
So speaking of the whole NIMBY mentalities colliding, I just saw that Ecuador voted to no more, I guess an indigenous tribe, no more drilling on their land or something like that. So you have, you know, when California is getting their oil from Ecuador, now Ecuador is not from, so what's, I mean, you're going to keep on kicking the can down the road? What's going on with California?
Yeah, we're going to kick it over to Guyana, and we're going to buy it from another country producing it out of the most biodiverse region in the world in the name of climate action. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Ecuador, and then, by the way, Ecuador is going to be overrun, already is overrun by the drug lords, and then all the people fleeing Ecuador will come and live in California and Texas because they want to get out of that hellhole. And so now we're burdened with financially supporting a people that are fleeing a territory that is destroyed because we let China exploit the people of Ecuador for their oil to go to California. So now the people of California unknowingly pay for all of it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's how it works. And the people have no idea. The general public has no idea that that's what's happening. They have no idea that our number one supplier is Iraq, where they flare 6 times the amount of gas that we produce in a single year. And that just goes to the one atmosphere that we all share.
As Chuck Yates says, there's not a no pee zone in a pool.
Right. And kind of bringing it back to how we start, you know, spreading awareness is I've tweeted to Chuck and the BDE and the Digital Wild Guy, like, come to California. More people around the country need to come to California to see what it is like, to see the level of homelessness in our cities, to see what how these policies manifest themselves and how ultimately the people are paying to support it.
So it's interesting. So we just went to California. My father-in-law's out there, and went out there and lived right next to, you know, close to the airport. Beautiful. There's like this national wetlands and all that stuff. But anyway, there's all these RVs.
Yeah.
Is that the Winnebago?
I mean, if you want to call them RVs, RVs with tarps over them because they no longer have
anyway,
roofs.
They were all along the wetlands and all that stuff. And like, first people are like, oh, that's great and all that stuff. But next thing you know, it's like, okay, well, this is happening. There's ATM machines in there. There's human feces, all this bad stuff happening. Well, for the sake of, you know, they use the environment to kind of clean it up there. And we went to Disney, came back. They were gone. I guess they were moved out after months and months and months.
Right.
It's going to take that little wetland area 10 years to get back to where it was.
Right.
Just because people were crashing on it for that long. So you bring,
Well, and that's kind of why I see the boomerang is more than just energy. It's, for example, where I'm at in San Diego, they've said you cannot camp on the street if there are beds available. They're seeing what's happening in San Francisco and saying, we don't want a failed city of San Diego. It's beautiful here. So we're going to change this whole situation. Okay. And that's starting to happen. So I think the same thing will happen in energy, where people will say, well, all I breathe is tanker air in the city of Long Beach. I don't want to breathe tanker air anymore. Once they realize why that's happening, they will start support drilling in Kern County. It will come back. It's just going to take education, time, the unraveling of poor policies, all of these things coming together.
What's been some, Ryan, going to you in DC, what's been kind of some of the biggest conversations that you can disclose with us, obviously, the conversations that you're kind of hearing around the table, and maybe some misconceptions that kind of like you're hearing that you're like, if I can just tell, everyone just knew this one piece of information, what would this be? Does that make sense? Does that question make sense? Like,
yeah, but it's not, but it's not just one thing, right? Like, look, it's, earlier this year, we had, for the first time ever, permitting reform that happened. Now, it was a small piece, but it was a small piece, but a big step. I mean, you have Speaker McCarthy, who's your congressman,
right?
Led on this effort. Him and Congressman Garrett Graves, they engaged in compromise and in negotiation and got the first permitting reform done that we've had in, I don't know, decades maybe. Now, more needs to be done, and they realize that, and they're continuing to work on creating more permitting reform, specifically as it deals with, the ENGO's litigation efforts and how long those can go on through the judicial process and kind of dialing that back, so to speak. But I mean, look, you have all of this government money that's out there through the infrastructure bill and the IRA, but you can't get it out because it takes 10 years plus, give or take, to get a project going. Now, whether that's traditional fossil, it takes a hell of a lot longer.
Right.
But if it's renewable, it still takes a long time because there's constant, environmental impact statements, environmental reviews. And now all those are important, but they sure as hell take too long.
Well, the thing is, we live in such a time where it's immediate gratification. If I want to order something right now, I'll get it in 2 days, right? A day if I'm a Prime, whatever.
Right.
If I want something if I want to see a movie, well, it's not on demand, then I'm not going to, we live in such a world of instant gratification. And when you're right, when it comes to these energy projects, when it comes to the infrastructure, when it comes to that's not an instant thing. That takes time. It takes time, energy, effort, money, and capital. It takes a lot of stuff, but it's not like if something happens.
Same thing with policy.
Well, we are, if we do get in a bind, it's not like we're like, oh, let's just go to our friends over here. Things take time. And that's why you need to start these conversations with people that might not have the same viewpoints, and just have conversations, just have friendly conversations, and just kind of educate. And yes, also go into the policy level.
Yeah. I mean, and you can have policy changes that take years to manifest into public law, or some type of regulatory change, because you have to change. It's as much as, you can educate people, saying, look, no, here's scientific facts, here's why this is important, but it's the political process, changing hearts and minds, that ultimately affects, the change that we need.
It's like, you say, I completely agree 110%, like 100, but it's so funny. It's like, the brush and the lens that's been put on hydrocarbons, and it's a life source to like everything. I'm looking at a hospital, like people are alive because of the byproducts of hydrocarbons, ambulance, helicopter, whatever you want to call it. But when it hearts my, I don't even know. Yes, there's a lot of places to start and all that stuff, but it's like, how do you even tell tell a story that kind of highlights the pros and cons? I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's a huge undertaking, and obviously we're here to just part of it. But it's one of those things, like, you wake up and you can't think about the whole problem. I guess you have to take it in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah. What's the saying? Like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
I guess so.
And that's what's being done in DC and in Sacramento and other state capitals around the country, is that we are, lobbyists like me, who are trying to help companies affect positive change to help, people make sure, I'll go back to when I first interviewed at one of the oil majors that I was employed at. I worked at BP. The then US CEO came in and said, look, I understand you want to work here. And look, what we do here is we light, heat, and move people by providing them with reliable, affordable, and abundant energy. And I'm like, damn, that's something I can get behind.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I think that people need to understand is go back to basics, go back to the X's and O's, blocking and tackling. It's, what's your energy reality? What is the energy reality?
Right.
We need to tell people that.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you want to be able to afford your energy? Do you want to be able to pay your bills? Do you want the government to pay your bills?
Do you want electricity rates like Germany?
Yeah.
Well, you're talking. The thing is, though, you're talking about the East and West Coast right now. But I was at a Crüe club dinner in Oklahoma, and from the other side of the table, some cats like, "Hey, is anyone else's electricity bill?"
Yeah.
I'm looking. I'm like, "Wait, shit, mine is." I looked at mine was almost $600 this month.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. Just like I did that tweet. Like
$600.
Yeah.
It's unsustainable. Unsustainable.
But here's the deal. Yeah. First off, it sucks. Okay.
Yeah.
Like I'm just throwing it out there. That's a legal term. It sucks. But the second thing I want to throw out there also is that hurts. Think about this. I am fortunate. I'm blessed. I'm in a situation where yes, that does bite me, but it doesn't leave as big of a mark. I'm thinking about, there's people out there that are doing paycheck to paycheck, whether it's the baristas, whether it's, whatever, whatever it is.
Right.
That's a lot.
Right.
When that bill goes up that much and it's not affordable, it's not reliable and all that stuff, that's a huge issue for the majority of the consumers out there, the people.
Right. And it goes to governance. And a lot of times we think of ESG as governance, but what about governance within the government and the administrative state, as Eric mentioned, being bloated and not doing its job effectively? People are struggling to pay their bills. People are struggling to stay in their homes. So now you quite literally in California have a situation where if you are a landlord or you have one rental property, people literally don't want to rent their homes out anymore because the tenants who can't afford to pay the landlord can stay in the home forever.
Yeah.
They just stay. You can't evict people anymore. So now people that own rental properties are like, I'm just going to sell this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, they're selling it to either, flippers who are inflating, doing all the work and making the prices go up, or they're selling properties to developers. And none of this helps the individual, and probably worse, none of this helps the individual that's either recently retired or coming out of school. And those are kind of the classes of individuals that get impacted most by regressive policies that hit their pocketbook.
But if you get into the mindset of, of the average consumer, it just kind of confounds me every time I think about it. But you think of these people expect more from a customer service aspect from the Amazons and the Apples and companies like that than they do their own government.
Right.
There's a lot of
people are just rolling over and not expecting the customer service from places that they should expect it from.
Yeah. Yet when the box comes up, they'll say, "Do I tip 20, 30, or 40%?" It's like, what? And people will be like, "Oh, I'll pick 20." It's
people behind me.
When I grew up,
30.
it was 10 to 15% was a good tip, and that's kind of emblematic of all of this, where people are so just trained to go with choices that are actually not benefiting them whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes back to all the climate discussion and bettering the environment and what we all want to do, but everybody's making these decisions that don't actually benefit the environment or themselves. But they expect change, and they expect these big bad oil companies to make it all go away.
It's easy whenever the villain is this faceless, nameless, big creature, oil company. It's like, I don't know. It's a place to be.
Yeah.
What else should we touch on?
Topic from the gallery.
The one point that didn't get melded in any of our discussions deals with the amount of money that is associated with those 1,500 wells that didn't drill this year.
All right. So
That's between $1 and $3 billion of capital investment and associated maintenance. So it's another $1 and $3 billion.
jobs too.
It was literally sucked out of the Central California's economy.
Yeah.
Do you want to repeat that because he didn't have a mic on him? So pretty much out of those 1,500, go ahead. Repeat
out
what you
of
said.
1,500 permits that are no longer being issued on an annualized basis, you're losing between $1 and $3 billion of revenue of job creation in one part of California, in the Central Valley of California, which is wholly dependent on agriculture and oil and gas. Or energy.
Right.
Now we lead the state in renewable projects as well. We do it all in the Central Valley, and it's drying up the income base. And what does that do? That trickles down to folks that own restaurants, folks that own coffee shops, folks that have upholstery businesses, folks that are decorating people's homes, whatever it is.
Their costs have risen as well.
And meanwhile, your cost of living's going up. Meanwhile, you're importing the product from elsewhere. Meanwhile, at the pump, you're now paying $5.50 a gallon instead of $3.50 a gallon like it is here. And somehow Californians are coerced or manipulated into believing that oil companies only gouge Californians, because somehow magically we don't realize that there's $1.20 to $1.40 per gallon in taxes being added at the pump to the people of California while we're limiting our own supply. So it totally distorts the economic picture in a very negative way for the lowest of wage earners. And oh, by the way, those jobs on those rigs that we're losing are six-figure jobs. Those are $120,000 a year jobs to people that don't even have a high school degree or that just came out of prison, because that's who the oil and gas industry employs. They employ anybody that wants to work.
Yeah.
And that's what we're losing, is this idea of work. It's, hey, we need the government to just give you a check to sit on your couch and drink beer. That's it. We just need to give people something.
Because it's spot on.
Well, it's all related. And I think
it
it's a
is
great point that he brings up, because we talk, like my buddies in Californians for Energy and Science, they own, there's drilling rig companies, there's drilling mud companies, there's pipe companies, there's directional drillers, there's people that wash rigs, there's people that dewater. There's so many service businesses around each permit that is being issued. There's biologists, because, oh, by the way, we look at every endangered lizard walking around any oil lease.
But let me just kind of put a capstone on this, if you will. Elections have consequences.
Yes.
And if people aren't involved, you get the government you elect.
Right.
And all of this that we're talking about could be, one huge, large moot point if there isn't a concerted effort to get the message out, to educate voters about the energy realities that are happening all around us.
Right.
Thing to talk about, if you want, is the Public Utilities Commission and the way in which it has allowed rates to be structured. I don't know if you're aware of this one. The state of California is the second highest electric utility rate after Hawaii.
Wow.
Which is a disaster.
I would have thought California was first.
It's not, it's second. but what's interesting about when you buy a kilowatt hour of electricity or of energy in the state of California, the average price for that energy is 8 cents a kilowatt.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of it, 16 cents of that 25 cents or more, is transportation.
Right.
Distribution and transportation. Think about what that means.
Right.
If you were to spend $4 for a gallon of gas, you're saying, well, of $4 gas, well, 3 of it has to do with trucking it to the gas station.
Mm-hmm.
What absolute malarkey! That's abject rape of the ratepayers. It's the only way to describe it.
And we had Duncan Campbell of Scale Microgrids on, and he's a great great person to describe exactly what Eric's talking about, that these utility companies are making a fortune on the distribution, and we as consumers and also we need to demand lower rates, but also we need to expect the utility companies to be out there for the public good. You know, utilities is something that should be kind of a public service, right? You should be able to get electrons to your home.
It's embedded in Public Utility Commission regulation.
Right. Right. And so it's an important thing. I mean, it's all very interconnected. And so however we can expose this is,
That's what I love about your perspective, Mike. I mean, you're very good at connecting the dots when it comes to like this affects this, affects this, affects this. I love how you kind of bring everything kind of whenever you do kind of get on your passion soapbox and you do talk about that stuff. No, I really do. I really dig it. Like I do like how you kind of attach it all, because whenever you do go in these rants, I can tell it's like you just want to keep on talking about it. I dig that.
Yeah.
But it is all connected.
Absolutely.
And I'll be clear too, is that I'm not against any form of energy.
Yeah.
I'm hydrogen, solar, wind, whatever it is. We have to have it all, because global energy demand isn't going anywhere. It's not going down. It's only going up.
Right.
And we need to have every aspect. But, and I harp on this, but, everyone hates politics because they're inundated constantly, especially in election seasons. But, there's only kind of political nerds like me, people who follow this, that's when people need to, I guess, kind of put their head down and power through and engage the process. As much as they hate it, or as much as they think that it sucks, your voice is important.
But what's interesting? Like everyone in the energy space, I feel like, is an energy maximalist. Whether you're on the renewable side, like Duncan, whether you're on the oil and gas space, whether you're in the everyone is an energy maximalist. But the thing is, though, you have to have realistic conversations. So you can't be like, oh yeah, we're gonna go to batteries. If the oil and gas companies stop lobbying against, batteries could overtake. Technology is not there. Technology isn't there. The realities of 2023, 2024, where we live today, it's not sci-fi. The technology is not there. So let's also engage in realistic conversations about and the thing is, though, we had this conversation. Whenever you read an article about, this battery could do this, it's always could do this. Doing this, might do this, should do this. Fusion could do this, could do this. There's always that catch term: could, should, might, potentially, could,
shoulda, woulda.
Coulda, shoulda. But the thing is, though, we got to engage in realistic technology, energy dialogue as well. And I think that's an important piece of it too, because if not, people are thinking like, well, we should be going on batteries. Well, there's batteries, only hold 12 minutes? 7? What is it?
We can't leave the present behind for the hopes for the future. I mean, we have to take care of the people now.
Damn, that's a great quote.
When's he running for office?
Seriously.
Yeah.
Never.
Hey, I got a question. Hot seat. Would he make a good politician?
Absolutely.
That means yes, you would. That was a trick question. You got fact checked. Would he make a good politician?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
I don't want to be one. That's fine if you don't want to be one. It's a question.
I don't even want to use the term politician. Yeah. Like, you'd be good. You'd be good in office. Let's just say in office.
Influencer.
I am a man of the people. I'm a man of the people.
You're a man of the people. Yeah. You are. You're in the people.
Yeah, exactly.
You are.
Well, I'm this way because I'm born and raised in San Diego. It's a beautiful place that I'm not going to leave. So if you're not going to leave, you have to say something. You can't just get governed into nothingness.
And this whole process with you about kind of getting more vocal and all that stuff, I mean, that was kind of pretty recently before we first met, because you started kind of putting content
a couple of years.
Yeah, you got out in a boat, went out there, you went to the ship, and you're like, look, you got all these tankers right here just burning dirty oil or dirty diesel right now, waiting to get in. We got pristine shit to take. We can drill, we can produce over here. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I was talking to Eric before about this and why I do it and why I think the big companies need to have a voice. Because you have to understand, I have this mentality because I'm not going to leave. But the general public thinks, 1, oil and gas companies are responsible for all this. 2, they'll just pack their shit up and leave when it gets tough, which is what Oxy did. They left California with 9,000 idle wells. Now they're the darlings of direct air capture and they're going to save the planet. No, go spend those billions of dollars and plug all these wells that you saddled CRC with. Era, Shell, and Exxon, they just sold out. They've got 9,000 idle wells. No, Shell, Exxon, go back there, plug those wells.
Clean up your campsite.
Chevron, everybody speculates, they're next to leave. All these big companies need to say, well, maybe we did managed this poorly, or maybe we let the abandonments get away from us, but we're going to fix it with the billions of dollars that we're making. And that will start to earn back the social license to operate.
Yes.
And they're not doing these.
You and I agree 110% on this. I've told people before that, look, rather than giving money to the Environmental Defense Fund, Sierra Club, whatever else it is, go and plug these wells. Now, look, there needs to be regulatory or legal changes, statutory changes about, if you go and plug a well that you don't have responsibility for, you shouldn't also have long-term liability for that. There should be some kind of grace period or some way to fix that, but incentivize companies to go and plug these wells that they may not have responsibility for, because everyone talks about ESG now, and that's going to be your biggest ESG impact by gaining back that social capital. 100%.
Exactly.
Agree with you 110%.
And it's not all their fault, because like you alluded to, the regulatory framework allowed that to happen over many, many, many decades. But it's easy for the regulatory agencies to say, oh, we're done. And now it's like, whoa, we better just leave. We can't do it all now. And that's not a compromise. The operators and the agencies need to say, okay, look, and maybe it's a 2-for-1 thing. Hey, we'll abandon 2 wells for every 1 well we drill. Or maybe we'll abandon, if we've got a lot of them, we'll abandon 4 wells for every drill.
Whatever the compromise is.
And that is starting to be baked into today's regulatory framework. But when the major companies just pack up and vacate, then that makes them look like they're fleeing a situation. Yeah. And that's what needs to change. They need to start getting engaged with the people and say, hey, look, we're going to fix this. That's it. We're going to fix this. What does every politician do when they get caught sleeping with the secretary? They go out and apologize. And then
not every politician, just to be clear. Not every politician.
But I mean, it's okay to apologize for something that is partially or 100% your fault.
And if they walk away from the party and all that stuff, then they just walk away and all that stuff. It's open to interpretation. So anyone could write the story.
Yes. And I said that at the Current Energy Summit last year. I said, if the operators are not standing up and talking about this issue, it will get written for you. Yes. And it will be the Center for Biologic Diversity, the Sierra Club, Greenpeace, companies that are, or whatever, activists that are set up to stop civilization in its tracks. They don't want anybody to thrive. They will be the ones that the media goes to for a quote. Do you want that? No.
That's a great point.
Sorry. No, you get me all worked up again.
No, I love it, dude.
This is great.
Yeah.
Love it. And this guy chiming in. Yeah, he's I'm going to stay out of this. And he pops in. He's like, I'll tell you something else. $1.3 million.
It's a very dynamic episode.
I know.
It's because you're doing the twofer here, the Crüe and
that's why. Yes, I'm glad you picked that up.
More twofers in the future.
I'm down for twofers.
Yeah. Maybe you need to buy me out of Energy Facts chats for a healthy sum of money.
Dude, what are you doing? First of all, where's the money? It's my MacBook. All right, where's the money?
See what we talked about? Got to come to DC.
Yeah.
Oh, it's happening.
Got to come to DC.
DC field trip. I'm game.
My wife and I are coming. We're going to DC, and we're also going to California as well in 2 weeks. We'll be doing. You know what? I got some ideas that we'll talk offline about that. So anyway, first off, I want to thank all of y'all for flying in for this very special podcast. That's the only reason why y'all flew in. It's that important. The conversations we have, our Energy Fact Chats and Energy Crüe, is that important. But honestly, I appreciate it. Do you have anything to leave us with, Ryan, Mike?
Look, no, I think from my standpoint, look, it's just, I would encourage as many people to engage the process legislatively, politically, regulatorily, as much as you can. Even if you don't have an in-house capacity to do that, make sure you're monitoring it in some way.
And if and again, for our listeners out there, if you have any questions about how to kind of get dialed in and all that stuff, we're going to be linking everyone's name when it comes to LinkedIn and stuff like that. Just reach out to Ron, and if that's, I'm trying to get the eyes like yes or no.
Yes.
Reach out to Ron. Just 100%. Find out. Hey, look, like if you're sitting there saying, okay, well, what's the first step for me to kind of get involved and all that stuff? Yeah. Just ping him. Yeah. Ping Ryan. He'll just say, hey, look, try this. Have you tried this? Do this or whatever. So just reach out.
DMs are open.
Slide into DMs. That's how my wife met. That's how my wife and I got together, and we're happy now. So yeah,
that's great.
Slide in the DMs. Slide into the DMs. What about you, Mike? You got anything?
I would encourage everybody, no matter what state you live in, to go to www.energyandscience.com. and click join us, and you can see what we're doing, all of our events, our environmental studies we're doing, our discussions on college campuses, everything. Just send me your info and you'll get, I don't send a lot of information. One email a month, 2 emails a month.
And honestly, it's so few and far between. You'll know about 3 days out before a meeting's coming up.
Yeah, you don't get a lot of notice. I'm busy.
Not a lot of email. Not a lot of email.
A lot of email.
We gotta figure something like that. And I'm actually gonna bring in one last closer for us, if you don't mind. What are you closing us up with today?
I don't have anything to say.
And that's all we got for us. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to Energy Facts Chats and the Energy Crew. It's been a blast. Always love sitting across the table from you, and obviously our second time within a week doing this, which is awesome, Ryan. But anyway, I want to thank everyone out there. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, leave a review, whether it's Energy Fact Chats you listen to or Energy Crew you're listening to, doesn't matter. But spread the word, and we hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk to everyone soon. Bye.
Thanks, JP.
Thank you.
No, thank everyone out there listening.